Today we have joining us Dr. Reverend Robert Flanagan. He goes by Bob. He's written a wonderful book. It's called The Courage to Thrive, Finding Joy and Hope in the Midst of Mental Health Struggle. We do have it here at the bookstore, and we also have his bio and all of his information on our website if you'd like to read more about him. Yeah. So, Bob, can you please tell us what brings you here and tell us about your book and what prompted you to write it and everything?
Yeah. So the story behind the book is, and thank you for having me. And as an Episcopal priest, I'm really excited to be with you all. One of my last trips actually was down to was the Large Episcopal Conference back in last January, where we get to be near the cathedral, the Rooted in Jesus conference back in January. Yeah, January this year, if one can believe that that's actually a thing. And there was a January, and we did enjoy it, and yet here we are. So what brought me to write the book was a conversation I had with my publisher, and we were back and forth on a couple of different projects that I was thinking about, and she said, "Well, you do all this work with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention." And she said, mental health is really, is a really important topic, and to bring it to the church is a really important, it would be a really important message. There's a thought that people have that that Christians are supposed to have great mental health, or we're not supposed to run into these issues because we can kind of pray and everything will be fine, or God protects us and everything, and we can feel protected by all this, or we just ask Jesus and we'll get rid of our mental health problems, like he got rid of so many demons out of people as he was traveling around the Judean and the Galilee Sea area, and that's not true. I mean, that the Bible doesn't point us that way, and that's just a myth about the Christian life. And so part of my in talking to my publisher, we said, a really important message to bring this out. And she said, particularly as a church leader, in particular, if who's supposed to have it all figured out and all worked out about your mental health, and would be a church leader. And my experience as an interim pastor at a variety of churches is, I follow great leaders, but they've all had their challenges, and some of them have been mental health issues, and to know and so part of my goal with the book is to pull back the veil of that, if you will, pull back the curtain, to be able to see clearly and to have a message of hope for those that are suffering from mental illness in places where somebody might just say, hey, you can just get through it, or just pray and it'll go away. And so that's not always the case. And so we began, she and I had that conversation in February, and I began to really write in earnest during the beginning of the pandemic. So this book does have that influence. I would sit in this room and write each of the spiritual exercises as they came, and began to the process. And so we were able to turn the book out in about 6 months, which was really really exciting, but also important. So it turned out I certainly didn't think that we'd still be in this place, as we are, and certainly in Connecticut, thinking about rolling back our social interactions again, and limiting activities, and the church activities are being recommended to be pulled back, and all of that. So that's really kind of the basis of the book, was kind of my own journey, but being able to be vulnerable enough about my journey to bring it to others, and share that message. So that was the basis. Yeah.
Sorry, I forget about the mute button. Bob, you had mentioned spiritual exercises that you had were writing in your room right there. They are the foundation of your book. Why did you choose that format for your book?
So I think so the book is laid out, for those who may not have it yet, is laid out with a topic. So there are 40 different topics. Each one of them are, related in some way to our mental health. And then the next piece is a biblical verse, which and a number of them not surprising, but as I was doing my research, there was one about one of my exercises is about taking meds, right? And in particular, in taking medication for mental health issues, there's often a resistance to say that this is going to affect me, it's going to change me in some way. And so a lot of people, and myself included, when the beginning is to say, no, I what's going to happen? We're messing with the brain. This is significant, as opposed to just taking, something that messes, I don't know, with your liver or your kidney or something, and so there was, and so I said, nah, there can't possibly be a Bible verse about taking medicine, right? Lo and behold, there is. And it's either in Ecclesiastes or Ecclesiasticus. And I have it referenced in the book on taking meds. And it says, yes, no, medicines are good, you should take them, essentially. So now we all have the basis of saying the Bible's behind us on taking medicines, and it's really okay. But so that's in laying out the biblical verses, and then I reflect on them, often using my own experiences, and then give people at the end a prompt by which they can think about what and their own life, and write about it, and reflect on their own personal experiences as related to what they've read. So historically, the spiritual exercises are an ancient practice. Certainly they go back to St. Ignatius and his spiritual exercises, but the exercise, that process of receiving a word, a verse of scripture, and then reflecting on that is a tradition that goes all the way back to the desert fathers and mothers that would be in community, and they're the what we would call an abbot, the leader of that community, the spiritual leader. A follower would come once a week or so and talk with that leader and say, can I have a word? And then they would go back into their cell and contemplate and pray about what was shared. And so this pattern is an ancient pattern that we have in the church, in our lives, that we can use. And so I'm following this ancient tradition to bring this topic to everyone.
I like how the book breaks it down into small, digestible pieces of exercises that the average Christian can do. Makes it easier for them. Another question I have is, if the brain is affected, are there types of prayers that are better than others to accomplish this? Right.
So there's a I'm going to mention, and Corey will get the link to this book. So the book is titled How God Changes Your Brain, and it's a few years old, but it's by Andrew Newberg and Mark Robert Waldman. And it's Andrew Newberg is a doctor, a neuroscience scientist, and they studied the impact of things like prayer and yoga and meditation and contemplation and mindfulness and its effects on the brain. And the interesting thing to take from it are a couple, is that over time we can shape our brain, our thinking. So all of those kind of adages around, we are what we think about, and those kind of traits are actually have some merit. And as and it takes time. And what we're trying to do, for those that may suffer from anxiety or depression, is through prayer, is to shape some of the interactions of what's happening in the brain chemically, but also neurologically. So think about the brain or there are patterns of thinking as roads, and some of those roads are more like cart paths and overgrown and have trees limbs on them and hard to and ruts and rocks and are really difficult old worn paths that we don't use a lot. Others are like interstate highways, and we use them all the time. Now, if that interstate highway takes us to a place that is dark or depressing or filled with anger or hatred or guilt or shame, the odds are that we get on our road, our mental neural pathways, and we're going to get on the interstate because it is the best paved interstate. It's got, you can go really fast on it and go back, back and forth, and the information passes there. And those are our neural pathways. And our tendency is to go to the easiest ones, the best paved roads, the path that we are most familiar with, and not that old, difficult path that's going to take longer. Even though that path may lead us to hope and joy and peace and happiness. And so what we try to do, and what spiritual exercises try to do, is to get us to a place to acknowledge that, hey, our typical neural pathways, our highways, take us to places that aren't good for us. And so that acknowledgement, and then the next piece is to step back and say, I'm not going to go on the highway. I'm going to take the old country road that is more difficult. And eventually what happens is, over time, is that if we bring ourselves to good thoughts and through prayer and contemplation or in good holy places for ourselves, then the highway becomes overgrown and unused, and so we don't go naturally to the places of anger and shame or guilt or remorse or hatred, and we go more and more to places of peace and joy and love and goodness. And so what's interesting is that we are influenced by these things, that they don't naturally happen, but there's a choice behind it. And so one of the things that happens in there is kind of building up these places, these roads that are better for us. We calm certain parts of our brain, and so things that are things that trigger our brain function to cause the hormonal reactions of secretions of hormones and the like into our body that cause anxiousness or affect us in a way that brings us more into more depression. Over time, we can influence those. Now, I'll say, kind of, how do we get there? One is through therapy. The other one is through medication. Sometimes we need medication to kind of to inhibit our natural tendencies to go down these paths. So it's like a toll booth or a stop sign. It says, no, that might be the fun, fast road to go on where you can go it's really exciting, but that's not healthy. So you're going to have the medicines help put a brake on that and to let you to go in a different direction. And so does prayer, and and these practices where we can acknowledge ourselves before God in these ways. So part of the brain has a critical role in our spiritual lives. And Corey, I'll give you one last little kind of brain science anecdote, is that over time, time in two ways. Time as in days, why I recommend for people to take their time with my book is because over time we can influence our our neural pathways. And we can't just stop that highway on day one and always go down the old country road. It takes time to make that shift. But also, in entering into prayer and meditation, we are engaging our brain in different ways, so that things like our frontal cortex and our and others, of which I'm not going to be able to pronounce right now the exact terminologies, but what happens is the longer we pray, our brain quiets down and the frontal cortex, and then if we pray longer, we also quiet down other parts of our brain, which what then is stimulated are things are the areas of our brain that will allow us to feel connected to the world or connected to God in deep and meaningful ways. So time in prayer matters. Now we talk, and what do I mean by time in prayer? Sure, you could pray for an hour, great. Meditate on something for an hour in prayer. Say the Our Father for an hour, or your favorite psalm for an hour, kind of repeating it and being conscious about your breathing. Awesome. But if you did it for 12 minutes, it's also awesome. So we're looking at that it's not a huge mountain to climb, to begin to start affecting the brain in really positive ways and to grow our good roads for us. So that's the thing that I'm looking at about that.
So what would be your advice to somebody who's watching this, who's really struggling? I mean, mental illness, depression, anxiety, it's really hard. It's really hard for somebody to feel like they can get up in the morning and get going.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
What would be their starting point for you? What would you advise for them? I wake up this morning, I watch this podcast, this show with you. Where do I go? How do I start? What do I do?
So I think it's first is acknowledge, the very first one of my the exercises is that self-acknowledgement of it's like, yeah, you may be a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister, or you may be somebody who is working in a variety of whatever the situation, your circumstances are, but you're also somebody whose brain isn't functioning to its fullest health. We might say that the brain is ill, or just not connecting in the best ways. And for us to acknowledge that is the first and foremost thing. And I would say and that's okay, is to say, it's okay. You would say, I broke my finger, right? And it hurts a lot. And I'm having a bad day because my finger hurts because I broke it and it's taking time to heal. Well, it's the same for the brain, except it's not a broken finger that we can touch and see and go to see people. I've got a broken finger, and this is what I did to it. Instead, it's the brain, which is so complex, and we can kind of live out our lives with people not really seeing seeing the effect of what we're going through because of our brain. It's just the way we can hide it, if you will, or it can be, or people may not notice it really well. And so I think first off is to say, hey, it's okay that things aren't that things aren't working as well as they could, and it's not your fault. And I do talk about that. It's saying, a lot of this has come about through trauma, and trauma just happens to us often. it's given to us by other people, and at times when we're vulnerable and we can't do anything about it, which is one of the reasons why we react the way we do, is because it is we want to be able to deal with it in a healthy manner, but we're so vulnerable in whatever moment. We might have been young, we might have been in a situation where we were a passenger in a car, and we weren't in control of things, and an accident or someone said something to us or did something to us, and it's not our fault, and yet our body is and our brain is still trying to deal with that, and that takes time. So that would be, I think, my first thing for day one is to say it's okay. Acknowledge where you are, because once you can, then you can begin to take the best steps forward.
Yeah, I think that's so important for people to remember. It isn't something that they created themselves. There's nothing to be shameful for. I think a lot of people might feel shame. It's no different than having your arm broken from somebody running into you. It's something that's happened. It's something that needs to be addressed. And it's nothing to ever feel that shame about.
Yeah.
You do have a question from one of the people that are listening today. St. Paul tells us in Philippians 4:8-9 wisely to think on the things, excuse me, my eyes are, that are true, noble, pure, noble, and admirable, leads to God's peace. I guess that's not a question. It's more of a
statement. That's
so
affirming what we're saying. Thank you. Yeah, I saw that, Martha. Thank you. Yeah. And so there we have the Bible affirming exactly what the brain is saying. Isn't it amazing? I think how the brain, how the ancients knew what we think we're discovering brand new. I mean, we can put the brain, we're able to now, and it's important, I think, to be able to put the brain science behind it. But the ancient word, they intuitively and by the Spirit knew these things, and I think that's wise to bring up. Thanks, Martha. Yeah.
So another question I have is, what specific exercises might be helpful to people this morning?
So I would say there's I would point people to one of the exercises is, and I'm taking with it. I'll tell you the story behind it. It's number 20. I think it's 25. Let me just double check, make sure I get you to the. So there are two that I would emphasize: 23 and 25. And 23 is about forgiveness, and it's not what I.
Bob, I think you're muted.
There we go.
There you go.
I did. How that happened. I do think forgiveness starts with the self, and if we are unable to forgive ourselves for whatever reason, how can we begin to forgive others? Isn't that in the Lord's Prayer, right? Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Well, the first one is forgive ourselves, as much as it's a petition to God, forgive us, but also we're offering up because we probably need help to be able to forgive ourselves of these things. And we need God's help to be able to do it. And so that's what I would say, is that if you feel in a place where you beat yourself up all the time, then spend time with number 23 and that sense of self-forgiveness, because I think it's critical, and that's the real meat of the book, which is why it's kind of in the middle in there, and not to say that the ones before it aren't important. Then number 25 is self-kindness, and self-kindness is again in that sense of taking care of ourselves, and in a way that I think many of us are not kind to ourselves. And why does it matter? Well, we have this sense of the great commandment that Jesus gave us, right? We all know it, right? Love God and then love our neighbors as ourselves. Well, there were days when I was really struggling with my mental health, that where I didn't love myself so much, right? And so how was I going to love my neighbor when I didn't feel all that loving? You know, if I would have any words with Jesus, you know, I would say, you know, loving my neighbor as myself is great. I like the idea, but there were days that that I needed to love my neighbor, even though I don't love myself, even though I'm frustrated with myself, even though I'm disappointed in my own body, and for what it's doing, and I want to be able to. I need a higher bar, because if I go out into the world with how I felt, you know, in my worst days, I'm not going to treat well. I'm not loving myself, so I'm not going to love anybody else, right? We need that bar there is sometimes sometimes we need to pause and say, you know, I don't do I love myself, and if not, can I be kind enough to myself to let that go? And so I would say the two things those are two things when I two things that are very important, and why I think forgiveness is so important is I think my experience in terms of Americans is that we have a hard time forgiving these days. And I had a student I taught once who came into my classroom. She was my advisee, and she came in kind of all on edge and upset about something, and somebody had said to them, and I said, well, I said, well, how about you forgive them? And she's, what are you talking about? And she's a sophomore at the time, I think, and so that was a very typical reaction, and yet she said to me, well, I might forgive them, but I'm not going to forget. And there's that sense of boy, it's hard for people to say, will you forgive me? Or you know, we might throw out, I'm sorry, but is there a sense of saying, can you forgive me for this? That's a vulnerability that it's really hard for us to do. And so I think working on self-forgiveness is the place to start before we can work on seeking forgiveness from others.
You made the statement that in your interactions with Americans, you find that we find it very hard to forgive. Why do you think that is? Why do you think us as Americans do find it hard to forgive people?
Well, maybe, you know, maybe I guess I'd say, you know, from being of Irish descent, I think the Irish can have problems with this too. But I did, you know, kind of just for sure, no, not stepping out beyond our own culture, is I would say there's that sense of vulnerability that we are supposed to have it all together, right? We are supposed to be people that that live in a land of opportunity and a land of immense wealth, and therefore, how could we really have any problems? And if anything has taught me of being a priest is wealth or lack of wealth doesn't have anything to do with pain. Pain is a human experience, and you could have all the money in the world or none, and the pain is going to be the same. Look at the people who the famous people that we can think of that have ended their lives. You know, of course, we think of Robin Williams, but and there are many others, or have attempted to end their lives, and that shows us that pain is universal to a human experience, and and to be vulnerable, right, is that challenge, because we don't want to, for whatever reason, we just don't want to admit that, Corey, and we kind of get in that place where we don't want to say, for I think for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I understand. So for others who do not suffer from mental illness, but may have somebody in their lives that do, how do you think they can benefit from reading this book? Or what can they take out of it that would be helpful to them?
Mm-hmm. I think it's from that point of view, I would say it's an insight into what happens to the mind or brain during illness, and part of kind of my being so open about encountering suicidal ideation or dread or anxiety and these things that were a part of my experience is to kind of to give that insight and to show, to saying, here's kind of what happens and the difficulties of it that are a part of that experience. I want people to not be scared of others who are suffering from mental illness, because it can be frightening. You know, if you say, hey, how are you doing? Now, how are you really doing? You might get something that you didn't expect in terms of that answer. And there might be there's likely to be a whole lot of emotion behind it. And that's just a natural reaction of kind of someone finally listening in a way that's helpful to them. But also, you're not going to cause somebody to be worse by asking a question about how they're doing. You by asking someone, hey, you know, are you thinking of ending your life, or do you have do you have a plan or something, isn't going to cause someone to say, oh, that's a great idea, now I'm going to go do that. That's not how it works. And if anything, asking somebody, they're going to be, oh, you know, thank God somebody's noticed and I can get help. The suicidal crisis often tends to last. I would say, I know of, in all of my work in psychiatric hospitals and with people that have suffered from mental illness, I only encountered one person who have ever had a continuation of suicidal crisis. And my interaction with counselors that work in the field as well is, and the research, the chemical research behind this, is that the suicidal crisis tends to last about 35 minutes. If you can work through somebody and kind of be with them for an hour, right, you've likely have gotten to a place where they're going to live a happy, healthy, and productive life. That are most people who have run into suicidal crisis or suicidal ideation, whatever you want to say, however you want to call it, thoughts of suicide, go on, you know, the vast majority of them go on to live healthy, productive, vibrant lives. And it's a temporary circumstance. So what I would encourage people to say is to say, remember, it's an illness. People are in pain and they want to end the pain. And what they feel is to how to end that pain for some of them is by ending their life, and because the pain is that desperate. And so what one can do is not try to solve that pain, but to get them to help and to be with them, so that, you know, bring them to the ER or to their doctor, and really the ER, and have them begin that process, and it'll just extend out time where the chemical imbalances can come back to normal, and they can move beyond that. So it's important to, I think, to remember not to be scared, to be loving to someone, and to understand that the brain is like all organs or all parts of our bodies can be out of health or it be ill, and that over time people get better. And so it's not something to be frightened of, but it's also not something to kind of say, hey, just get over it. Maybe you're not praying hard enough, because of the chemistry that's going in there.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. I wanted to open this up to any other comments or questions that one might have. You can unmute yourself if you want, or you can add them into the chat box. If nobody has any, I wanted to ask you, Bob, if you had anything else you'd like to add before.
I have a quick
Marcy?
question. So does your book, is this a good book for somebody in those teen years between 13 and 17? They seem to experience an awful lot of anxiety, pressure from social media, growing up, finding themselves. All of that induces a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression in the youth.
Right. Yeah. There is that with the young people these days, and for a variety of reasons. I won't, try to give you, Marcy, the clinical stuff because it's not in my area. But what I would say is yes, and they may, depending on the age and your understanding of them, kind of go through it with them, and be able to kind of say things like, is this what you're feeling? Is this the kind of things that you feel? And or is it or not? And what is it that you're feeling? And that would validate a lot of what they're going through. I think the teenage brain has so much going on in it, right? That and we don't have, frankly, we don't have a lot of studies on the adolescent brain. And so there's a lot more learning that needs to go on. And a lot of the studies are people hitting their 20s or in college, and they're signed up for a research study and they participate with it. So we have much more in that area. But there are growing, the knowledge base is growing. So I would say that yes, there's much more information there. But this might be something that I would sit down with a young person and say, hey, let's pick out one or two and say, or have them pick out one or two and say, well, what do you think? And let's work through the exercises and then see if they pick up on it. I think it would be wonderful, but I also think that, and there's nothing wrong if they said, no, I'm gonna read this myself. It's not nothing bad in it. If anything, I'm a little, I'm a little. Some of the reviews said he uses a little inappropriate language here and there, and I think, well, I get that, but there was also, as I'm writing it in a pandemic, I was, there's part of that kind of raw realness that I wanted to put in it, to kind of say, yeah, this is not it. There's a messiness to mental health, and it's not all kind of tied up neatly in the language, and I felt that I was being more honest that way. So now that you know that, it's something that I would encourage you to give it a try. Yeah, Martha. Yeah.
Yes, well, I love it, and I thank you so much for it. The fact that it is so easy to read, and you are so honest, and that you're a priest is very significant, because everything about it to me says that to a family, a mother, a father, their young adult that they're struggling with because of this journey of mental illness, you say to them, it is okay. You can come out of the shadows. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to feel ashamed. You don't have to feel in any way this is something that reflects negatively on you. And what I'm experiencing is I'm not struggling with mental illness. Anyway, not yet that I know of, but I have so many friends that are especially mothers, strong Christian praying mothers, and they are in such a journey with their adult children that I have terrible battle with mental illness. And there is that fear to come out in the open. They're afraid of what other people at church will say. So to me, this is powerful for taking away the veil, bringing it out for what it is, helping all of us. What I'm finding as I read through it, and it's so enjoyable, it's helping me do exactly what you said. Think of simple questions to ask, have an idea of how that person might be feeling. And because mental illness is an area of uncertainty for so many of us, we're afraid to ask a question. We're not sure what to do. But this is helping me know more of what to ask. So I'm going through it for myself, but I already know I have 3 really good families that I'm giving this to them. And what I will say to my friends is, this will be so good for you to read, first of all. And as you read it prayerfully, discern, how do I give this to my son, who's 23, 25, whatever, or maybe 17? Or do I just hang on to it? Do I mention it? Do you know what I mean? I think the Lord will just show them how to use it, but it will be invaluable for them to just learn so much going through it themselves. And I think it could be, wonderful for their child that they pass it on to. So Bob, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Martha. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Bob. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to add?
I go just one last thing, if you'd like. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook under Robert D. Flanagan under Facebook, and I think it's Robert.D.Flanagan on Instagram. And one of the things I do a couple times a week, I post prayers and for the day or for the time period, and it's basically kind of a bit of it's where I am and where I think everybody is, and what word might be helpful for some. So we have this check in, and I try to do one during the week and one on the weekend as a rhythm, and and so those are there as I've written prayers at the end of each of the exercise. So too are these kind of additional prayers that people can have. And if someone is feeling in particular, kind of around COVID, on my website, which is robertdflanagan.com, you can sign up for the mailing list, and you get a set of prayers that I've created just to help us through the rest of this COVID thing that we're going through. So thank you, Corey. I really appreciate my time here with you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, can you lead us in a closing prayer to say goodbye?
Yeah, I'm gonna use the thank you for that. I'm gonna use the last prayer from Courage to Thrive, and I think it's a good way for us to finish. So the Lord be with you, and also with you. Let us pray. Draw near to me, loving God, and hear my petitions. I long to thrive. Grant me the courage to bridge the gulf that separates me from what my soul desires. Embolden me to keep following the well-worn path leading to joy. Send me in peace into the world and its mixtures of delights and disappointments. Provide me always with hope that by it I will remain a grateful and courageous child of yours. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. We will have all of the information that Bob mentioned on our website. He has his own link if you would like anything further. Bob, thank you so much for being here with us. It's been a great pleasure, and hopefully you'll come back to see us soon. You all enjoy your Tuesday. Hopefully I'll see you Thursday night for Conversations with the Priest. Take care.
Take care. God bless you, everyone.